The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days when I knocked on her door with everything I owned in a torn duffel bag and nowhere else to go. My shoes were soaked, my pride even more so. I hadn't planned to stand on Arzoya Meta's porch looking like a failed promise, but life rarely asks for permission before it rearranges you. When the door opened, she didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just looked at me the way people look at something fragile and dangerous at the same time. And that's when she said it. You can stay, but just 1 week. I replied, with more confidence than I felt, you'll beg me to stay longer. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that happen in ordinary daylight, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. Arzoya and I had once been inseparable in college, back when mornings smelled like cheap coffee and ambition. She studied architecture with fierce precision, sketching buildings as if she were mapping out the future. I studied literature, convinced words could fix anything. Somewhere between deadlines and heartbreaks, we drifted apart. She built a career in the city, I built dreams that collapsed one by one. A failed startup, a broken engagement, a father's sudden illness that drained every savings account I had. By the time I stood at her doorstep, I was a man stripped down to essentials, hope, regret, and stubborn pride. Her apartment sat on the third floor of a sunlit building overlooking a small public park. Even on that gray morning, children were running below with bright umbrellas, and old men played chess under the pavilion. The world continued as if my crisis were a minor inconvenience. Inside, her space was clean, deliberate, every corner curated. Plants thrived near wide windows. Blueprints were rolled neatly on her desk. It felt like stepping into a life that had direction. I placed my bag carefully near the couch, aware that my chaos did not match her order. She laid down the rules that first afternoon. I would take the couch. I would look for work immediately. I would respect her routine. No late nights. No excuses. Her tone was calm but firm, like someone who had learned to survive disappointment by controlling variables. I agreed to everything. I would have agreed to anything. What I didn't tell her was that the confidence in my reply, "You'll beg me to stay longer," wasn't arrogance. It was desperation dressed as bravado. The first challenge wasn't finding work. It was swallowing my pride. Each morning, sunlight streamed through the wide windows, exposing my reality in unforgiving clarity. Arzoya left early in tailored blouses and structured blazers, her hair pinned back, her posture unshakable. I stayed behind, sending resumes into digital voids, calling old contacts who no longer remembered my number, standing in queues for interviews that ended with polite rejection emails. The city in daylight is loud, relentless. It doesn't pause for broken men. By the third day, tension began to hum beneath our conversations. She noticed the untouched coffee in the sink, the size I thought I hid. I noticed the way she avoided lingering in the living room, as if proximity to my struggle threatened her carefully built world. We had history, but history does not automatically translate into trust. Trust is built in present tense. On the fourth morning, something shifted. I woke before her and stepped out onto the small balcony. The park below shimmered in golden sunlight. Children laughed. A stray dog chased pigeons in dramatic arcs. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't fear. I brewed coffee, watered her plants, and tidied the space without being asked. Not as repayment, but as participation. If I was to stay even 1 week, I would not remain a guest. I would become useful. Arzoya noticed the small changes. She said nothing at first, but her eyes softened. That evening, she returned home visibly exhausted. A major client had rejected her design proposal. Months of work dismissed in a 10-minute meeting. She tried to hide her frustration, but it leaked through clipped sentences and restless movements. For the first time, our positions reversed. She was the one doubting herself. I listened. Truly listened. I didn't offer empty optimism. I asked about her design, about the reasoning behind her choices, about the vision she had seen before anyone else could. As she spoke, her frustration transformed into clarity. By the end of the night, blueprints were spread across the dining table, sunlight long replaced by warm lamplight. We analyzed, adjusted, refined. In helping her rebuild her confidence, I felt a peace of mind return. Days passed with a new rhythm. I still faced rejection, but I no longer carried it alone. She still battled demanding clients, but she no longer retreated into silence. Mornings were brighter. We began sharing breakfast by the window, discussing ideas instead of limitations. I started freelancing small writing projects online, nothing glamorous, but enough to contribute to groceries. The act of earning, even modestly, reignited something fundamental within me. The real test came on the sixth day. I received an offer for a temporary job in another city, low pay, unstable contract, immediate relocation. It was the kind of opportunity you take when you're afraid nothing else will come. I spent the afternoon in the park below, watching the chess players move their pieces with patient strategy. Life is not always about immediate moves, sometimes it's about positioning for something better. For the first time, I questioned whether running again was the answer. When I told Arzoya about the offer, she listened carefully. She didn't tell me what to do. She simply asked whether I believed I deserved more. The question lingered in the sunlight-filled room like suspended dust. Did I believe I deserved more? Or had I grown accustomed to settling? That evening, I declined the job. It was a risk. It terrified me. But something inside insisted that growth required courage, not escape. The next morning, fueled by determination, I pitched an article idea to a regional magazine, an honest piece about resilience in urban life, about invisible struggles behind polished windows. To my shock, they responded with interest. By afternoon, I had my first significant assignment in months. Meanwhile, Arzoya revised her architectural proposal with renewed confidence. She integrated community spaces inspired by the park below, designs that embraced sunlight and openness. A week earlier, she had felt defeated. Now she moved with conviction. On the seventh day, sunlight flooded the apartment more brilliantly than usual. It felt symbolic, though neither of us said it aloud. I had submitted my article. She had presented her revised proposal. We sat quietly at breakfast, aware that the deadline she had set, just 1 week, had arrived. She looked at me differently that morning. Not as a burden, not as a risk, but as someone who had stepped into her life and strengthened it rather than draining it. She admitted that the apartment had felt less lonely with me there. That my presence had reminded her of the version of herself who once believed collaboration was strength, not vulnerability. I smiled, remembering my bold claim. You'll beg me to stay longer. I hadn't meant it romantically or manipulatively. I had meant that if given space, I would prove my worth not through grand gestures but through consistency. Through showing up. Through participating in daylight, not hiding in shadows. By noon, she received a call. Her revised design had been approved. Not only approved, it was praised for its human-centered vision. I received an email minutes later. My article was accepted for publication, with a request for a recurring column. We stood in the middle of the living room, sunlight wrapping around us like quiet applause. Neither of us had saved the other in dramatic fashion. We had simply reminded each other of who we were before fear took over. She didn't beg. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked to the closet and cleared a shelf for my clothes. A small gesture, but monumental in meaning. 1 week had turned into possibility. If this story is touching your heart right now, if you've ever been 1 week away from giving up, take a moment to engage with this video. Like it, share your thoughts in the comments, and let someone else know they're not alone in their struggle. Months passed. Daylight continued to pour through those windows, illuminating growth rather than doubt. I built my writing career steadily. She expanded her firm, hiring young designers who reminded her of the fire she once carried quietly. We learned that pride isolates, but vulnerability connects. That help offered with boundaries can become partnership. That confidence sometimes needs an audience of one. Before I close this story, I have a special request for you. Comment the word, second chance, below if you believe 1 week can change a life. Looking back, I understand that the most powerful transformations rarely happen in darkness. They happen in broad daylight, when everything is visible, our flaws, our fears, our fragile hopes. Arzoya gave me shelter, but more than that, she gave me accountability. I gave her support, but more than that, I gave her reminder. We did not rescue each other from ruin. We stood beside each other while rebuilding. Sometimes all it takes is 1 week. One open door. One decision not to run. And the courage to believe that you are worth more than your worst season. I arrived at her doorstep soaked in rain and regret. I stayed because I chose growth over fear. And in the warmth of ordinary sunlight, 2 lives quietly changed, proof that when kindness meets determination, even a single week can become the foundation of forever.